Welcome back to TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja, and with me is Ange. Hi, Ange.
Hi, Stas. Hi, everyone.
So the big news that because we record on a Thursday and upload on a Friday, we missed the big news last week, which is the Hillary Cass's recommendation to close the Tavistock.
Huge.
Massive and complete vindication, you know?
And that has implications for us because our biggest gender clinic, the biggest gender clinic in the country, which is the one at Royal Children's Hospital, is based entirely on the Tavistock clinic.
Yeah. And look, so far, just the Australian newspaper has reported on it. I haven't seen it anywhere else, which is pretty typical. But they reached out to the state health ministers. Victoria, Tasmania, and Queensland health ministers have all said, oh no, there's no need for a review here in Australia. It's not an issue. Like, unbelievable. And the New South Wales health minister didn't reply. So New South Wales is Liberal, so maybe they're considering it. I doubt it.
They're the only state without self-ID. They will be after Queensland folds. They will be the only state that doesn't have sex self-ID.
Well, that apparently the balance of power in the lower house there is with this independent Alex Greenwich, and he's a massive trans activist.
Yep. We know that the Children's Hospital here is dispensing puberty blockers like lollies. We know that they're performing surgery on minors at least as young as 15, double mastectomies. The thing with the puberty blockers that gets me, though, is my eldest daughter went through precocious puberty. So at 7 years old, we traipsed off to the Royal Children's Hospital and spoke to the endocrinologist, and I said, oh, what about puberty blockers? And they said, no, they're dangerous. They can cause osteoporosis and heart disease, right? So that's in 2007, right? And yet all these other countries have banned them for kids experiencing gender confusion on the basis of even more dangers, not just those two, but, the effects on the brain, the effects on the physical development and all of those things. And because they're a fast track into, cross-sex hormones and surgery. And yet here in Australia, they're like, no, it's not happening. It's not happening. And the problem that we also face is because of the conversion therapy laws already being in, the things that they're proposing in the UK, like the watchful waiting and more integration with mental health services, means that it is illegal for mental health clinicians to suggest to a young person that maybe their problems are not just their gender identity, but something else. So we are completely trapped in this hole. And, and you can see why, because all of the politicians have already sold us out, and because, of whatever it is, which I suspect is donors to their political parties, trans activist donors, we're voiceless, and the media won't let the Australian public know, although I did see it was in The Guardian as well as The Australian. So maybe slowly people are sort of going, oh, what's this? What's this news? And it's catching on.
Well, a couple of things. They're not banned. Puberty blockers aren't banned anywhere, but certain countries have taken a more cautious approach. But I did see a headline in response to this Cass recommendation. I didn't read the article, but it was along the lines of the next UK Prime Minister may well ban puberty blockers for gender dysphoria. And frankly, I think that's exactly what needs to happen. Given the side effects, given that it solidifies a transgender identity, we'll see. And the other thing I just heard this morning was there is actually a review built into the Victorian conversion therapy legislation. So someone messaged me and said, now is the time to start petitions, start gathering signatures, start talking to, the Australian Psychological Society, places like that, try and get everyone on board to form some sort of united front against this.
Well, we've had paediatricians on our side for a long time, some highly regarded paediatricians, and they've been, recommending that puberty blockers aren't used and cross-sex hormones aren't used on minors, and they're being completely ignored, even demonised.
Mm-hmm. It's just outrageous. I'm really shocked by the ignorance of the health ministers at the state levels. It's just outrageous.
I think they know. I think it's deliberate. I think they found an economic model that helps them, and I think they're being willfully ignorant. I think they know exactly what is going on.
Well, the other thing out of the UK was an article by a former equalities minister. Can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she gave this rundown of what was happening behind the scenes while she was equalities minister, and how it's the politicians get all their information from the public servants, and because the public servants are completely captured by this bullshit. And here in Australia, we could, follow the path back to ACON's influence. So the politicians getting really bad information from the public servants and their advisors. And then, they're too scared to act, even when they know what's going on is barbaric.
Well, we know Daniel Andrews, because Victoria's the most far down the rabbit hole state. We know Daniel Andrews' chief of staff is a militant trans activist, and so is her wife. So,
yeah, look, we've got a long way to go. It's going to happen. It has to happen because, we know that children are being harmed as a result of this. So it will happen here in Australia. It's just going to take a bit longer. And I'm exhausted.
Same.
But we'll get there. So take that. So yeah, all of that. Oh, and then I think yesterday, I haven't read it yet, but the British Psychological Society has come out with a statement
what are they
on what's happened, and they're very much, I just read one sentence, and they're very much in support of closing down the Tavistock. And we know that in Australia, actually, there is some task force has been set up by the Australian Psychological Society to have a look at this.
It's funny. It's funny because my kids have a little bit to do with child psychologists, because they have autism, and every single practitioner's office we walk into has trans flags. It has the rainbow, and it has all sorts of propaganda on the walls. Now, these are all registered with the Australian Psychological Association, so they would obviously be within the rules or propaganda that's even provided by them.
Yeah, just outrageous. And it's so sinister, again, hiding behind rainbows, this awful destruction of children's lives.
And nobody wants to be homophobic. So, hiding behind the LGB, creepy men hiding behind kids and the LGB, that's what it is. Yeah. Because nobody wants to abuse kids, be abusive towards kids and tell them no. And nobody wants to be homophobic. And that's how they get away with it, by coattailing onto the LGB and little kids. It's just awful. It's a men's sexual rights movement that, in typical appropriation ways, has just latched onto, organisations that they think will let them get away with it. It's just disgusting.
Speaking of homophobia and organisations that won't let them get away with this, the Shrine of Remembrance fiasco.
Yeah.
So if you weren't following what happened, the Shrine of Remembrance here in Melbourne, which is, dedicated to those who died in the major world wars, they agreed to light up the shrine in LGB rainbow colours. Sorry, LGBs. And they got copped to this massive backlash, and apparently were receiving abusive messages. And look, a lot of it probably is driven by homophobia, but and so they've decided they're not going to go ahead with this light display. But you know, on the back of what happened with the rugby players last week, this is another example where LGBTQIA++ have tried to insert themselves into a very male institution, a men's institution, and men have said no. And they've listened and they've withdrawn. But when it comes to inserting themselves into every single fucking women's organization in the country, women are just like, yeah, sure, come in. Yeah, you're a woman, no problem.
And once again, they've coattailed onto the LGB because, unfortunately, now when people see the Pride rainbow and they see their progress flag, they think of furries, they think of diaper fetishists, they think of drag queen story hour. And I think a lot of the opposition to, Pride is homophobia, but it's because, once again, I remember back in the 80s where homosexuality was linked to deviancy, and gay and lesbian and bisexual people fought really hard to be seen just as normal people, and that they weren't deviants and they weren't going to convert your kids and they weren't going to be child abusers. They fought really hard to change the perception, and their success of that is measurable by the acceptance of marriage equality and other things. But then all of a sudden this trans thing's happened, which in the DSM-5 is linked to deviancy. And they've once again been linked to dodgy stuff. And I think a lot of the homophobia is coming from that, because of it's now the acronym is so big that the creepiest of creeps is part of that acronym. And, so it's like they've gone back again. They've gone back, and all the hard work that the gay and lesbian activists have done to, clear their name from being associated with deviancy has been undone by the heterosexual deviants and the autogynephiles and the diaper fetishists and all of those people that call themselves queer and demand being part of that rainbow.
Yeah. It's a really sad state of affairs.
Yeah. I've seen there's an LGB section at the National War Memorial in Canberra, and it's really good. And part of this lighting up the shrine was to do with part of that exhibition being here in Melbourne. So you can go and learn about the history of, lesbian and gay and bi people in the military. But all of a sudden, now it was all trans people. So there might have been, a couple of trans people throughout, with internalised homophobia, probably transsexuals or whatever. But now it's all about the trans. So, they won the war. They defeated the Germans, So, yeah, but no, it's worth having a look at some of those exhibitions. I went to a queer exhibition at the National Gallery, and part of it was completely cringe and bullshit, but part of it was actually really good. So, yeah, I encourage people to go see it.
How many out trans people have there been in the Australian military in the last 100 years? The only one I can think of is Catherine McGregor.
And Mr. Clinch. There's quite a few who've transed after they've come out of the military. That seems to be a prerequisite, particularly for the Australian ones. Yes. So, I mean, I'm sure there were transsexuals, that would be very uncomfortable to be, a gay man in the military in the, whatever century, like whatever decade in the First World War or whatever. So no, I don't doubt that for a second. But the way that it's marketed now, it was full of trans and queer people.
The trans people that in the last 100 years were probably more like Klinger from MASH. Not really trans. Look, our guest has arrived a little bit early, but let's bring her in and see what happens. I hope she's actually ready and hasn't just joined.
We're going to get a cuppa.
Yeah, she might have gone to get a cuppa.
Look who it is. It's our notorious TERF.
The most well-known TERF in Australia. Welcome, Kath. How are you going?
Good, thank you. Good women. How are you today?
Good, good.
Good to see you. So a lot has happened since you last came on the show. Where are you at with it all? How are you going?
Right. So I think last time I came on the show, I was just talking about the sports stuff. I was still working for a law firm. I hadn't thrown my hat in the ring for the political campaign as yet. So after the election campaign, I just wanted to take a few weeks, a couple of holidays planned with the children and the family. And then I was going to come back and have a look at all the sort of opportunities that have come my way and decide next moves. But obviously I've had this lovely skiing accident where I've dislocated and broken my shoulder and ended up with some nerve damage. So that's kind of put the kibosh on everything, and I'm sort of having to have enforced downtime, which is very difficult for me because I'm not used to sitting still.
Yeah, bummer. But you've had a few spots on Sky News. Is that going to be an ongoing thing, do you think?
It is. So I'm a regular with Paul Murray. Sky have been really supportive, and they just wanted to give me an opportunity to broaden my issues base. Because putting my hand up as a Liberal candidate, obviously my campaign became all about my position on trans instead of some of the other arguments and policies that I wanted to discuss. And, you know, I got accused of people saying, oh, well, you're a single issue and this was your only platform. And that was never the intention. The media just grabbed hold of it and ran with it. And that's what it became. So, Paul's been really supportive in just giving me the opportunity to sort of talk about other things.
Excellent.
And you're appearing in a documentary about cancel culture too, aren't you?
Yeah, so again, that was filmed prior to the election campaign. It's hosted by Rowan Dean. It's not just myself, a number of other women that we're all familiar with. So Jasmine Sussex, Sal Grover, and I'm not entirely sure who else. But yeah, focusing on cancel culture, and that'll be coming out on Foxtel in the not too distant future.
Cool.
Excellent. And look, things have changed in sports as well. Huge revelations from FINA.
Mm-hmm.
And now rugby in the UK. I just saw yesterday there was some cycling event in the US and a trans identified male came second, and the organisers decided, nah, we're removing you, and they bumped the women up to second and third place, and he was completely removed from the results. So that's huge.
The tide has definitely turned to see FINA stand up, and with the policy that they put in place, they sort of emulated rugby in that they had scientists, they had a legal cohort, and they asked the athletes themselves, and ostensibly maybe in an environment where it was confidential, except we did have Kate Campbell speak up, and she spoke so eloquently in her defence. And FINA decided, on the balance of all the evidence, it was simply not fair. And we needed to have a dedicated female sports category. So for such a significant sport, like all aquatic sports, FINA represents, to stand up and take that position. So I think most of the other organisations were just waiting for someone to be at the vanguard. And I've also seen, I think it's triathlon, that have put requirements in place that are so stringent that no male's going to be able to meet it. They have to have really low testosterone. I think it's for 2 years, and they can't have competed. There has to be a break of 4 years between when they last competed as a male. So, it's almost like they're trying to dodge a bullet by making the requirements so stringent, no male can meet it.
I read something the other day that Rugby Australia has essentially banned males from the professional competition, but allowed them at community level. Is that right?
Oh, that's interesting. Are we talking about union or about league? I think league might have said something like that, but I find it really interesting that Claire Chandler actually spoke to this in the Senate chamber.
And saw that.
So, you know, obviously the protections are being afforded to the elite, but that risk of injury that we're all familiar with, 20 to 30% serious head and neck injuries, that burden is still being placed on those playing at community level. So I look at my little 6-year-old who loves the rugby league, and I think, why should she have to be placed at risk when she gets old enough, when they divide the sexes, and she might end up with a catastrophic injury? So it really needs to be from all levels. And, you know, taking a step back to FINA, where they said from the age of 12, and if they arrest puberty in the male competitors and they don't have the advantages of male puberty, I actually disagree with that. I think it just should be males observed and recorded at birth, because the evidence that exists currently, we know that male fetuses get a shot of testosterone 6 weeks post-conception, 6 weeks after birth, particularly the one after birth. That contributes to how male children roughhouse. So they have this way of playing sport that is very different to the way that girls play sport, and that happens in utero. So we really need to acknowledge that and just make it across the board from birth.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
I've noticed that difference in my own children. I had 2 children close in age playing AFL football, and my daughter was afraid of playing because a lot of the girls were bigger than her, and she was actually afraid of getting hurt. Whereas my son, particularly on the weekend, he's in the finals now, my son will see a boy the same age but twice as bigger as him and launch himself at him and tackle him. And, you know, the difference is so obvious to me as a parent, and my son and my daughter are the same size. So, yeah.
I mean, I watch, you know, my little one when she plays rugby league, and at the moment it is mixed. And she, her father is like 6'3", my brothers are like 6'5", so she's a big kid, and she's fast, and she's bigger than the boys. But when it comes to the actual tackling, like, she's good when she gets the ball and she can run for it, but when it comes to the tackling, she will hold back. Even though she's one of the biggest. And you will see some of those little guys who are complete pocket rockets, but half her size, who will just all stacks on. So you really can observe it from a very young age.
Wow. So what is it going to take to even get the Liberals to start talking about this? Because, as you mentioned, Claire Chandler gave a brilliant speech in the Senate yesterday, I think it was. And, you know, one of these, the Labor Minister for Sport has said, no, we're not going to support Claire Chandler's bill.
Oh, that's right. They're going to put it to the back of the shelf to gather dust, which I think is complete betrayal of women and children. And again, Zali Steggall's out there saying, oh, there was a whole lot of misinformation during the election campaign. And my response to that is, oh, you know, is that because women are just seen as a man but with a lower hormonal level? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So what I hear about what's going on in Parliament, the halls of Parliament at both state and federal level, people are aware of it. There's sort of, you know, you definitely have the zealots who agree, who are on side with the trans. You have people who are concerned, but they are more focused on, like, you know, bigger issues, national security, cost of living, and so on. And during the election campaign, I was frequently told that this is a fringe issue. And as I think we would agree, it's not, because it's impacting every level of our national interest. I mean, education, health, sport, language, women-only spaces, as you know, the safety of children, prisons. It goes on and on and on. And I think we all know we're about 2 to 3 years behind the UK. So we actually probably need to have more examples where it's manifesting and that are getting into the press. So we're all very familiar with the fact that we have a very captured press. But hopefully with what happened to me in the election, we can see that the debate is getting out there. And often even if there is an article that is very pro-trans, you look at the commentary and there's a lot more people speaking up. So I think it's really going to take some high profile, you know, if we have our own Karen White or Leah Thomas, and then just the ordinary Australians really standing up and pushing back. I think people really need to take the time to write to their MPs, even ring them up and just say, look, I don't agree with this. I want you to support Claire Chandler's bill. And they have to make a note of that, and it has to be recorded. So people really need to start getting active.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I've slacked off the last month or so. I haven't done much. And even in response to this revelation that the Tavistock is closing down, I started a letter to send to all the health ministers at the state and federal level. Started on that, and then the same day the news came out that, well, the health ministers have been approached and they're not going to do anything. And so I just got really disheartened, and I still haven't got back to the letter. But then someone else suggested write to the child safety commissioners, because they, well, at least in Tasmania, I haven't looked at other states yet, but in Tasmania, they have the power to initiate their own investigation into whatever the issue is. So that could be a place for everyone to write to, child commissioners.
Oh, that sounds like a really good idea. And I'd say also, you know, write it and print it out and post it, because, you know, these bureaucrats, you know, MPs, candidates, you get so many emails that things just get lost in the wash. But if you have an actual letter, it's a lot harder to just, you know, you can't just delete it. You actually have to look at it and throw it in the bin. So it might have more impact in that way. But I think, like many of us, been really struck by the fact that the mainstream media has not covered the failure of the Tavistock at all. And there is litigation afoot here in Australia. I think it's going to take something like that for our bureaucrats to really wake up when they start to see what the bill is going to be to the taxpayers for compensation to these children who've been damaged. I think it's going to take something like that for the politicians to wake up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. It'll be detransitioners stories, detransitioners taking legal action. Otherwise, you know, they can just pretend, oh no, we're following the gold standard here in Australia for treating gender dysphoria, and that's what the Royal Children's Hospital says. Oh, we're following the gold standard. But Michelle Telfer wrote the gold standard, and she leads the gender clinic. It's insane.
Yeah, it's a really big conflict of interest there. I mean, her whole professional reputation and her livelihood depends on that. And there is that famous saying that, you know, a man will believe anything if his paycheck depends on it. So the other thing is, you know, the funding that the organisations get and the gender clinics receive, like the organisations who push this narrative. And that's where people like Senator Claire Chandler or Senator Alex Antic have been really good, because they've been able to sort of ask these questions in Senate estimates. I think Mark Latham does it here in New South Wales, and getting it on the record and getting them to justify this type of expenditure.
It was no coincidence that when they announced that the Tavistock Gender Clinic was closing, the same day Daniel Andrews announced another couple of $1 million for LGBT orgs.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah, he just keeps handing them money every couple of weeks. He's like, you know, announcing either healthcare or some other thing for those orgs. Yeah, so that was his way of deflecting away from what's going on and keeping all of the trans activists on side.
Well, I think, you know, if you look at the federal level, we've now got Labor Greens Teal, and they are going to go as woke can be. I mean, they've already started, you know, going completely off the reservation with all their demands. And I think we should let them make those demands, let them get out into the press. I mean, I think it was yesterday that the Greens put forward a motion that they wanted an LGBTIQA+++ commissioner for their special interests, and that was actually struck down by Labor and Liberal, because that demand, there's no constitutional justification for it. People who are in that cohort are protected by the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, because that's where the discrimination laws to protect same-sex attracted people and gender identity sits. So it falls under the Sex Discrimination Commissioner. So there's no justification for them having their own commissioner. And to see that struck down because it's simply not statutorily possible, I think we just need to let them make these ridiculous demands and see them being told, no, you can't have that.
Mm. What do you think, what did you make of Bill Shorten the other week ordering Medicare to change their forms from birthing parent to mother? I found that really unusual coming from a Labor MP.
Well, Bill Shorten is on the side of the Conservatives within the Labor Party. I was down at the Snow, I was making everyone in the lodge sit there and watch the Today Show to see Sal Grover have her initial interview, and then trying to feed the kids breakfast and get them ready to go up the hill. And then I got a message from Sal saying, oh my God, Bill's come out and said that they are withdrawing these forms. I mean, I actually burst into tears. I was so shocked. I thought, to have such a stunning win and such a quick turnaround, it really goes to show that if we do highlight these demands, average Aussies don't agree with it. It's just weird. You're going to start messing with newborn mothers. Yeah. I mean, Aussies aren't going to stand for it. I really don't think they are. And I think Bill Shorten was definitely responding to that.
Yeah. I think you're right you're absolutely right with the perspective of the general public. They won't agree with this. And I just watched a video the other day of a guy in the US going around asking just random people on the street, should children be allowed at drag shows? And it was really funny because some of them were like, yeah, sure, why not? And then he'd show them footage of what's actually going on with, drag queens acting like strippers, wearing fake prosthetic breasts and just having these fake breasts flopping around, kids putting dollar bills into their underwear or their hands. And as soon as people saw that, they were like, no, that's too much. No, no kids at drag shows.
Yeah, well, it's grooming in plain sight. And society has been conditioned to be kind, be inclusive. Historically, we've seen what has happened to the LGBT community here in Australia and overseas, where we're all aware that there's corrective rape and gays are still killed. And I think that the rainbow fringe activists here are still capitalising on that sort of legacy sympathy to push through these really extreme demands and break down child safeguarding and trample all over women's rights. And most people, they're busy. They're definitely not understanding this issue to the degree that we do. They're trying to pay the bills. They're worried about interest rate rises and that kind of thing. But when it is presented to them, so again, we just need to get this out as much as we can. This like libs of TikTok. I mean, they've got, whenever they put things out, it's extraordinary. And all they're doing is turning back on these wokesters, what they are saying, and just exposing them for what they are.
Yeah, I've been quite enjoying libs of TikTok. I think she's done an amazing job. She's setting up, she's got a Substack now as well. She's doing a newsletter. And yeah, I kind of wish there was more of the really extroverted, crazy examples here in Australia that we could, publicise. Yeah.
Speaking of crazy examples, Kath, on the weekend, you attempted to attend a function that was invaded by militant activists. And the thing that surprised me most about that is that the mainstream media, which has misrepresented and demonized you for the last 6 months or so, was completely silent on it, in spite of evidence appearing online of the behaviour of these people.
Yeah.
You want to explain to us what happened?
So the Young Libs of Western Sydney had organised a pub crawl. They asked me if I wanted to come along. I knew there were going to be a number of young people attending who did contribute their time to my campaign. And I, obviously I'm injured, and it was a Friday night in the city, so I wasn't intending to do the pub crawl with them the whole night, but I thought I'll show up for a drink at the first venue. I'll say hello to everyone, see how they're going. Fortunately, I showed up with my campaign manager and one of his friends who are quite large males. They said, oh, we'll meet you beforehand and walk you in, make sure everything's all right. Me, in my continuing naivety, just went, oh, that's really nice. We can have a little catch up, not even thinking there might be a security risk. So the organiser had changed the venue at the last minute, still didn't twig it might be a security risk. I walked into the venue, I walked into the room where the Young Libs were. It was one of these really old pubs in Sydney that sort of have the twisty turny staircases and the low ceilings and what have you. I saw some people that I knew. One person is a trans woman who actually was on my campaign, who I was quite happy to see because we'd had some quite robust discussions out there on the hustings. And I was there maybe a minute and someone said, the socialists are here. I'm like, what is the socialists are here? What does that even mean? And then I realised there was a young man, large guy standing next to me who just threw up his hands and started chanting sort of arguably defamatory things about me. Katherine Deves is an evil bigot, trans rights are human rights. And then people within the crowd stood up and started engaging in these chants. And I realised, oh God, the event's been infiltrated. And later on, the organiser said to me, obviously I don't know everyone in the group, and they were, the socialists had showed up, dressed as conservatives, usually they show up looking like the grubs that they are, but they showed up in suits and ties and their hair neatly brushed and so on. So they sort of blended in. And I realised I needed to get out of there. I'd had some incidents during the course of their campaign that when I would be attacked or approached by someone I knew to be a threat, you just leave. So I just grabbed my handbag. I grabbed my campaign manager's friend who was standing there looking a little bit stunned, and I said, just walk with me. Went down the stairs, and people were shoved and pushed in the melee in the room, and if I'd fallen over again I would have dislocated my shoulder. I've been told that if I hit it again that would happen. There was a young man there who goes and documents protests by the name of Chris. He was there. He was pushed down the stairs and he's done a serious injury to his knee. So we left the venue, and then there was more protesters outside, continuing with their mantras, chanting at me. So we rushed over to a cab and got into the cab, and the poor cabbie's going, what's going on? And I'm just like, mate, just shut the door. We just need to drive. Just drive. He said, what's happening? I'm like, drive. And we just drove away. I spoke to the documentary maker the following day, and he knows who these protesters are. We know their names. They are basically provocateurs. They come from wealthy families. They are professional students. They show up at a lot of these events, and they just disrupt and they intimidate and they harass. So Chris made a complaint to the police. He went to the police station, sat there, made a complaint. Also, the trans woman who was a part of my campaign, who was shoved, she called 000 twice while the melee was going on. The cops didn't show up. So the reports that the police weren't informed, again, is false reporting. So the fact that I can't even go to a pub crawl and just show up and have a quiet whine to say thank you to my volunteers, and that turns into a story and a headline. There was a small article in the Sydney Morning Herald, I think in one of the columns the two guys who write it don't particularly like me. They're always just writing nasty, vindictive little stories. They made some smart ass little article with respect to that. But, you think if it had gone the other way, and if it had been trans people and then it had been, the evil TERFs showing up, it would have been headline news. We all know that.
Yeah. And you were so badly misrepresented by the media. I'm still bitter about it.
Yeah, look, like there were some journalists who very much were like dogs with bones, who just, were able to sniff out a story. They didn't care about the arguments that I was making. They cared about the fact that I'd said scandalous words and made that the clickbait. There were quite a number of journalists on the left who just ran with the story and just kept repeating it ad nauseum. And as we know, many of the things I said were decontextualised, taken completely out of context. People saying, we need to have reasonable debate about this, not this, whatever Katherine Deves is saying. And I'm like, well, if you looked at it, it's in its entirety, you would have seen that it was very reasonable and it was evidenced. And I'm telling the truth. But unfortunately, I never really got an opportunity to defend it properly. So I just had to watch what happened in the media, and I had very little control over any of it.
You did receive an apology though, didn't you, from one of the news agencies?
Yeah, very discreet apology from SBS with respect to talking about men claiming a trans identity in the UK prison system. People, the male estate, the UK prison system, and half of them, are there for sex offences. They're convicted sexual predators, and that's been upheld by the Ministry of Justice in the UK and the UK Parliament.
Yeah, that one really got to me because it was so out of context. And the ABC repeated it as well, and the same complaint was put into the ABC that was put into SBS, and the ABC were like, no, we haven't done anything wrong, whereas SBS, issued an apology. So
yeah, they might lose some ACOM points.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to fall in the rankings, ABC, would you?
No,
wouldn't want to report truthfully on something. So yeah, it was strange the way the narrative just got away, and I just found it shocking that, the biggest story is, say for instance, what was happening to the children or what's happening to women in prisons. Not the fact that I said those words, but I think that the left were so threatened by me. Obviously they wanted the doyen of the Teals to get in Zali because she represents large-scale solar panel commercial interests, and they didn't want to have their voice to Parliament knocked off her perch. So they saw me as a threat, and, it was good clickbait. And then obviously within the Liberal Party, we also have the factions. So I'm not factionally aligned, but we have like the Conservatives, broadly the Conservatives, and then the moderates. So the moderates, people like, Matt Keane, Trent Zimmerman, who else was it? Dave Sharma, and obviously Zimmerman and Keane particularly came out against me. And I think Keane got more media coverage for, accusing me of whatever he did than he has for anything else, which is quite interesting. But, and then they turned around. So the people in the electorates around me, so yeah, Zimmerman, Sharma, even Frydenberg down in Melbourne, who got knocked off by Monique. Oh God, sorry, what's her last name? It escapes me just at the minute. The other Teal down there, I was blamed for what I said, impacting the outcome of their election. But the swing against me was far less than the swing against them. And they were incumbents who had much bigger budgets than I did and much higher profiles prior to the election. So when they sit there blaming me, I'm like, well, I don't know. When you look at the results, I think it must have been other reasons that you got knocked off, and it wasn't what I said.
Interesting here in Victoria, Moira Deeming has been picked to run for the Liberals. And God, it's almost like they're just, the media in particular are just copying what happened, what they did to you, and applying it to Moira now.
Yeah.
And what was the other thing?
Yeah, so Moira's going to just need lots of support. I mean, she has a few different views to me. She has particular views, I think, with respect to maybe COVID and vaccines, also around the abortion debate. But yeah, she is already being subjected to what I was subjected to.
Yeah.
But again, it's because they see her as a threat. And my view is in Victoria is that Dan Andrews has gone so woke. You know, he'll be lucky to get over the line at this next election. And I think, you know, with Moira standing up, I think she's standing up for the upper house. So I think for women like us who have these sorts of views, I mean, I had so much support outside of the woke little metro areas. So you get into the outer suburbs, regional, rural, New South Wales and Australia. We have broad support, so maybe being in the upper house might get her a better result, because you know, it'll be people around the state voting for her, not just the people living in her area. I believe she lives in a suburb of Melbourne. Yeah, so hopefully she's successful and gets into the upper house and can you know, review the ridiculous legislation that Andrew's government has managed to get through.
Actually, that's what I was going to say. Already, Liberal Party members or representatives have come out anonymously to condemn her pre-selection. It's like, I don't understand why Liberals, I thought it was the left eats the left.
Yeah, there's a pretty big division in the Liberal Party at the moment. And obviously now that we're in the opposition at the federal level and, you know, pretty much in disarray, you know, we've sort of lost our way. I think we need to find what our soul is again, what our values are, what we stand for. I think the message that we had at the election was it was just all over the place. And we've got one part of the party that want to become, you know, Labor light, which in my view is not the right way to go. We've already got Labor, we've got the Teals who are pretty much acting as a political party. You know, people want to have a centre-right option. And I think if we're going to have a dual party system, we do need to have sort of a centre-right and a centre-left to balance each other out, you know, take turns governing. Have different focuses when each party is in power. So, you know, you don't want to, I mean, if we just become more left, I mean, why would people vote for us? They can vote for Labor, Greens, Teals. So we'll make ourselves irrelevant and we won't give people any alternative. And then it will be maybe the more extreme parties like, you know, a United Australia, etc., who might, I don't know how well they did in the election, not that great, but I mean, you might get people going even more hard right, and you sort of lose those centre-right people. They've got nowhere to go. Yeah,
I think you're right. Why Peter Dutton? I don't understand. He's so unlikable. Is that just me or?
Look, I've never met Dutton, but my understanding is, from what I've heard within the party, he's highly intelligent, and you know, he's got a really difficult job in trying to reunify the party, and in terms of just that leadership to sort of try and shepherd us through the opposition while we pull ourselves together. From sort of people in the know, I've heard that he's got the skill set to do that. So I guess it will just remain to be seen, you know, if he's able to achieve that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, we better wrap it up there. But it's been so good to see you. You look well despite your shoulder.
Thank you.
Thank you so much on behalf of all the TERFs here in Australia for sticking your head up and you know, becoming, like I said, the most well-known TERF in Australia.
Well, we certainly got the conversation started. And, you know, to all the listeners out there, even though, you know, I wasn't able to speak publicly on any of these issues during the election campaign, I did see the support. I was aware of it. I knew that you guys were fighting hard for me on social media and writing letters and getting out there. And I saw it, and it really kept me going. And I'm so grateful to all of you for fighting the good fight, you know, for the cause and for me. And it meant the world. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kath.
All right. Thanks, ladies.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Cool.
Wow.
Yeah. She's a good sort, Kath. As a lefty, I can confirm she's a good sort. Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing I was going to mention in there and didn't get to it was, you know, that surfer, the man that competed in the women's over in WA and won. Like, I can't believe that didn't make it into mainstream news. The only place that reported on it was some freaking surfy magazine.
That's right. It's deliberate. It's because of the ACON funding and because the major news agencies don't want to drop down in the points.
Drives me nuts.
Me too. It's just terrifying when you think of what doesn't make it into the media. What else are they hiding? Not just on the gender stuff, but what else are they hiding? I was actually hoping that Victorian ICAC would reveal all sorts of dodgy money going in and out of Dan Andrews's government, but they haven't. I haven't seen anything in the press revealing the source of the dodgy money, just that branch stacking's occurred, just that, you know, politicians are receiving political donations and not declaring them, blah, 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 right throughout Victorian Labor, but nobody's come out and said, oh, it's going to, you know, these gender orgs. But I would not be surprised, and I hope that that information becomes publicly accessible. But the same media that doesn't report on gender issues is responsible for reporting that. So
I tell you, like with what happened to Kath, it's just so obvious. It just, like, I always knew that the media had this amazing, like, a lot of power. Seeing how they just pilloried Kath just really hit it home for me. Like, they're unelected, they get to censor. It's just, yeah, sorry, I've lost my words.
It's difference between reporting on somebody, or, you know, and even, God, like, you know, Pauline Hanson gets a fairer hearing than Kath does. Like, you know, they were personal from the get-go. You know, they were nasty, they were malicious. They weren't reporting facts. They deliberately concealed facts when they were reporting the things that she said. I mean, all of their diatribe was based on deleted tweets, deleted, some of them years ago. So I spent most of the time, you know, directing people towards their Graham Lennon video where Kath said some controversial things. I directed them towards some of the deleted tweets so that people could see the context. And when they did, they never got back to me. So
there you go.
Yeah, and I wouldn't defend, you know, Kath and I are on different political spectrums. You know, I wouldn't defend someone as vehemently as I have Kath if, you know, she wasn't a good and honourable person. You know, just because you don't believe men are women doesn't make you a demonic right-winger.
That's right. That's right. In news today, Thursday, Jessica Hoyle has been featured in an article in the Daily Telegraph, I believe it was.
Wow.
The wonderful Julie Cross, who seems to be a journalist that's on side, has done a whole article about Jessica Hoyle's. So most of our viewers already know. For those who don't, Jess applied for an exemption under anti-discrimination laws in Tasmania to hold a lesbian-only event, and it was denied on the basis that it would discriminate against different types of bodies, as in male bodies. So she's talking about taking that to the High Court. She does have a crowdfunder that's going. I'll put a link into the description for that. But yeah, that was really good. You know, and like in the UK, it's been lesbian women that have come under attack largely. And so it's really good to see a lesbian woman here in Australia fighting back. Yeah,
it's ridiculous that the state can make, you know, lesbians excluding men illegal.
It's just
insane.
So upside down.
I'm not surprised it wasn't the Mercury that didn't put Jessica in their paper, because they're so biased towards the Greens and the pro-trans propaganda. They're basically shilling for trans. Yeah. These
activist journalists, like it's so bad. It's such a bad time for journalism. It's so biased. It's unbelievable.
And these politicians too that you know, are saying things that are just, they don't, you know, that they don't believe them, but it's the party line about this gender stuff. You know they're being dishonest. You can tell by looking at them. You can tell by reading their words, and yet they're still going along with it.
It's got to be around 80% of politicians don't believe any of this stuff, or, you know, if they were properly informed on the issues, they wouldn't be going along with it. It's got to be.
There's even domestic violence advocates who are saying trans women are women. You know, there's people, you know, or you know, victim advocate Grace Tame, for example. There are people in important public positions who are going along with this trans women are women mantra, but none of them are, you know, thinking it through. And if you put questions to them, say, oh, should a trans woman be in a female-only domestic violence service, they won't answer you. But they'll still say trans women are women. So you know for a fact that people are saying it, but there's exclusions. But they're not saying that. They're not being honest.
On a different note, you know that bloke Alok?
Yeah.
The non-binary. He's coming to Melbourne. The Festival of Dangerous Ideas are giving him.
He's dangerous, all right.
God.
Dangerous to kids.
Yeah, this is the guy that said little girls are kinky. And that, you know, this is, I'm gonna use their language. This is pedophile adjacent to be saying that. Actually, this goes back to what Elizabeth was talking about last week. This concept that children are sexual from birth. That's what he's spouting, and they're fucking giving him a gig. Unbelievable.
I wonder how much tickets are. I wouldn't mind going. I'm recording it.
Yeah.
T-shirt. Well, this T-shirt, Team TERF.
Or maybe we should stand out the front and hand out pamphlets.
They'll be expecting us to do that. So, yeah, maybe we should.
All right. Well, any other bits and bobs?
Oh, look, I just want to make a shout out to, what's his name again? Is it Amy? What's his name?
Amy Sargent.
Yeah, Amy Sargent made a little video based on one of our interviews here with Bronwyn Winter. And he condensed it into a tiny little video, and he put close-ups of my face when I'm smirking in agreement with Bronwyn. So, yeah, I'd just like to thank Amy for watching our videos and making that little video.
It was all about him, that video.
Like, he thinks I'm renting space in his head and I don't even know his name, so... Oh, well, any publicity is good publicity. If he wants to promote our channel, good on him. At least he gives us credit, unlike Channel 10.
So fun. Yeah, true. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Please like, please share, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you again next week.
See ya.